Tanzra's most feared and powerful demons have come together, forming a legion. Harnessing all of the underworld's power, they have raised Tanzra, the Lord of Darkness. Tanzra has sent forth these demons to destroy. Prepare for a weirdly long intro sequence. Recording-wise, almost 7 years later to the day, it's time for us to finally head back to ActRaiser. Welcome to Let's Play ActRaiser 2. We're just gonna get right on into the game. Ripped and torn, the slain body of Tanzra was returned to the underworld. Feeding on the intense hatred each held for the Master, 13 of Tanzra's most feared and powerful demons joined together. With their combined power, they raised the spirit of their mighty leader. Tanzra, vowing revenge, unleashed these demons upon the land below. Move the Sky Palace until a land name appears and press the A button. I will give you a brief explanation of the land you have selected. Together we must combine our power and rid this land of Tanzra forever. Like with ActRaiser 1, our main way of getting around the world is using the Sky Palace and just moving around until you find an area. With that said, if you look around, you'll notice you have access to a lot more areas to start with than we did in ActRaiser 1. I'll get more into that as we go. The people here used to work very hard at keeping this land healthy. It was once famous for its beautiful forests and rivers. One day, these people lost their desire not only to work, but also to live. You may find answers to what has happened by exploring the town of Industen. And that's just to our northwest. Whenever you see one of these little Stonehenge-looking things, you're usually above a level. Master, a strange cloud seems to appear, followed by rainfall, then disappear. Please try to locate the reason for this. Master, please prepare yourself for battle. Are you ready? May luck be with you. Cue the still awesome level transition. And thus our first level begins. Before I get into the mechanics, though, brief moment of just mourning. This game's soundtrack is still really good. It's still done by Yuzo Koshiro, just like the first game soundtrack. With that said, Industen, as the expected first level, isn't as strong of a theme opener as Fillmore was back in ActRaiser 1. That's almost an untouched level of hype-up and energy present within a first-level theme. Either way, like ActRaiser 1, ActRaiser 2 is largely an action platformer. However, the action has been very much upgraded here in the sequel, down to what the playable Master Avatar can do. Back in ActRaiser 1, you could only largely jump, swipe your sword, crouch attack, and use one of a couple different spells you unlocked throughout the game. But here in ActRaiser 2, we not only have a lot more we can do, we have every ability from the start of the game, to the point where it can honestly be a little bit overwhelming. For one thing, you now sort of have a double jump. I say sort of because your double jump is more of a lengthy glide animation that starts with an extra little hop upwards, which will then slowly start gliding and get further and further as you go. Then you can also notably press down to just dash at the floor. On top of that, we have every spell in the game by default, as well as 3 MP, which is what those little scrolls are below our health bar on the top left. The way you use them in this game is by holding down the attack button until the avatar glows red, and then releasing it. With that said, what spell you use depends on what state you're in when you release the button, whether or not you're in midair, whether or not you're holding down certain buttons and directions on the D-pad and all that. I'll talk more about those in a moment, though, because it's time for our first mini-boss, this Venus flytrap adjacent monster. This thing has 2 attacks, charging across the field, which is actively a pretty large hitbox, but you can just do the little double jump glide to get around it, and firing 3 projectiles in a spread shot, which you can block by ducking and blocking the lowest one with your shield, which is actively a very key thing about this game, by the way. You can block projectiles with your shield at pretty much any time. With that said, similarly to Proto Man's shield in certain Mega Man games, the shield is only actively out in front of you when you're crouching or standing still. You cannot walk and block projectiles. Absorbing that can actively really be a savior in some cases. Watch out for the mud below us at the moment right now, by the way, because I believe if it's not instant kill, it does a lot of damage, to the point where on my first playthrough, it regularly killed me. This jump right here kind of sucks. That's just weirdly precise. The thing about the glide is that there's times you need to use it very precisely to reach platforms in the far distance or get through narrow passageways, and at large, the advice I'm going to give here is if it's a distance-based jump, jump off of the platform as far off to the side as you can. When you have most of your body sprite even off the ledge, as that's just going to help guarantee it. With that said, this room's where you're probably going to first figure out you can also attack upwards with the Avatar's sword. With that said, it's not a direct upwards attack, it's more of a diagonal. Time for our first boss fight. This here's the Demon of Fatigue. It has 2 main attacks, either throwing its sickles at you or using the cloud that it's sitting on to either suck you into itself or blow you to the spikes in the distance. With that said, as you can see, it's not getting much of a chance to do anything due to the Raging Bomb spell that I just used. I'll talk more about that in a moment. At the end of any given stage, your score is tallied up alongside another 100 points for every single second on the timer at the end of a boss fight, because like most older games, you have a timer that if it runs out, you just lose a life outright. Not that there's much of a chance of it running out in my experience in this specific game. Generally, it's pretty generous about that. Master, you've done it. The reason for the corruption of diligence was brought on by the rainfall. Released from the cloud written by the demon Fatigue. Diligence can now return to life as it once was. Oh, really? Let's go check in on them, why don't we? Something has happened. If you look closely, you can see the people hard at work. Master, I'm concerned about the upper part of the river that runs near town. Alright, I guess we can go check up on there. All ready for our next level, welcome to Benefic. Upstream of the Benefic River, this area seems to be infested with demons. Please cleanse the water by defeating the demons. Master, please go down to the world and destroy the demons. Can we stop ending every sentence with demons, please? Now, you might be noticing, if you're familiar with the first game, that we're missing something here. I'll talk about that once we're in the stage. Yeah, I'm going to be silent for that almost every single time, because God, I love that level start thing. So, one of ActRaiser 2's biggest changes from the original, by that I mean the biggest change, is that ActRaiser 1 was equal parts action platformer
as well as a very light simulator game where you got to raise the areas up, get their populations up to power yourself up, and then do the second act stage at any given region. ActRaiser 2 does away with the role-playing elements and the simulation elements entirely to just be a pure action platformer, which, to mimic the words effectively of many that have come before me, definitely a bit of a weird choice. I think what makes the first game feel so special is that really unique blend of the sim stuff and the action platformer. So them only focusing on one mechanic set for the sequel, I guess shows that they at least had something they wanted to try and focus on, but I think it just makes for a lesser experience. So I'm going to do a double jump right here and then hold the up button on the D-pad because that allows you to do a longer hover that descends faster than just the outright glide at a distance. But for getting down to areas more slowly and precisely, like that item holder up there is very handy. Item holders are those weird little rectangles you see me breaking every here and there. What they hold will largely kind of be dependent on the one. Sometimes it's a health pickup, sometimes it's points, sometimes it's in extra MP, sometimes it's an extra life. It really does depend on the one. There is still a bit of randomness when it comes to item drops, but that's not from the item holders, it's from enemies. Enemies can largely drop items at complete random, and it can be a bit of anything, really. Although, in most cases, especially in the game's larger stages, you want it to be either MP or health, like that MP right there. I believe MP is always a 1 MP drop. HP, I think, can be 2, 5, and 10 largely off the top of my head. So, the spells. When I was fighting Fatigue, I used one called Raging Bomb. That's arguably the best spell in the game for one reason. A, it's one of the fastest to come out, and B, it's one of the only spells that has a very good chance of damaging multiple times, and it does a lot of damage per hit as it is on any given boss fight. We're going to be using it again momentarily, actually. To use that one, you hold the attack button until you're just flashing red, and then before you let go of the button, you need to hold up on the D-pad, and doing that, the master will release 3 balls upwards in an arc that will then fall down on top of enemies, and they can all hit the same enemy for mass damage. It's the best spell in the game, largely. We're going to get a good example of it against this snake mini-boss. This thing has one attack it uses 2 different ways. A 3-way spread shot, just like the Venus Flytrap mini-boss in the previous stage. When it's up in the air, it'll fire it downward diagonally in the direction it's facing. When it's on the ground, it'll do it straight forward across the ground. The spacing for this can definitely be a little awkward, but as you can see, the Rage Bomb takes it out pretty quickly on top of some extra hits on top of that. I am trying to save my MP, though, because largely every stage in this game has 2 bosses. A proper boss fight at the end, and then a mini-boss. There's a couple of exceptions, but they're pretty far and few between. So we saw a little bit of it at the start of the stage, but from here on, the stage's real mechanic is water currents, because we're on the Benefic River. We gotta jump up this giant hill to get past the water current. You can try to walk through it, but you're not gonna be getting a lot of ground too quickly, so I'd recommend just doing rhythmic jumps and glides to get as much distance in as you can. The biggest threat here isn't the water itself, though, as it is the merman enemies that slide down the water, as they'll often come down at such high speeds from off-screen that you don't have a lot of time to react, especially if they show up when you're in the middle of a jump anyway. Most normal enemies take between 1 and 4 sword slashes to take out in the game with a few exceptions, and thankfully, similarly to ActRaiser 1, enemies in this game are still very vulnerable to hit stun, where you can just keep them still long enough that they never really get a good range on you all the same. With that said, we're already coming up on the actual boss fight at the end of the stage, because the end of the stage is just up at the top of this waterfall, and not for nothing, this is a noticeably harder fight than Fatigue. Housed within that shell is Sloth, a snail. Sloth starts the boss fight by raining boulders down from the ceiling. You can thankfully hold up on the D-pad to raise your shield up to the air to completely block those. Towards the end of that rain, Sloth will then place 3 landmines along the river, which will then just be pushed along by the current. Once all 3 of those are out, Sloth will then peek out for a moment of vulnerability, and then fire 2 lasers at the location you're at when they're fired. Ultimately, this is still not the hardest boss, but there's a lot more to keep track of here compared to Fatigue, to say the least. With that said, Rage Bomb's really good here as they allow you to capitalize on damage in a faster method than just trying to go up to them and slash at them and all that. Most of the other spells are good here as well, but their limited range compared to the Rage Bombs means you're not going to get as much damage in. I'll talk more about the rest of the spells, though, once we're in the next stage, probably, if I had to guess. For now, let's see what our angels have to say, which is worth noting. There's actually 3 angels we talk to. There's one with the sword who you talk to at stages. There's one with a book, I believe, that you talk to at towns. But if you save the game, you get a password, which there's a 3rd angel that gives you that. We're basically never seeing the 3rd one with how I recorded this LP. Master, you've done it. All the demons in their power have been eliminated from this region. Master, let's return to diligence for a moment. We should listen to the people. Why not? Diligence has returned to the vigorous, hard-working town it once was. According to legend, you can hear a sad voice calling from the West Sea. Shall we go to the West Sea? Worth noting, you can do the regions in this game in largely any order you want, but they do have lines like that at the end of the dialogue in a region to kind of push you off towards the next one. The only limitation on that is you can only do a region's Act 2 after its Act 1, which makes sense, honestly. Welcome to Tortoise Island. There appears to be a town riding atop a tortoise. The town of Devote began to sink into the ocean, causing people to evacuate. Even now, the town of Devote is infested with demons. From the depths of the ocean echoes a plea for help from those submerged. Master, please save them. Time for our big water level for the game, sort of. It's more of a visual thing than anything else, but I'll get more into that in a moment. So, what I mean by it being mostly a visual thing is that while we clearly have a lot of layers and visuals here, they're absolutely gorgeous, by the way, that sell you being at a water level, whenever you're in an area like this, the Master's control is completely unchanged. Which, depending on what you like out of your water levels, is either a really good thing or a really bad thing. With that said, we do have some pretty healthy enemies here, like these fish that have a lot of health. The thing to really watch out for in this stage, though, is these little conch shells. They're landmines. And if you get too close to them or hit them, they'll explode a shot in each of the 8 main directions. And not for nothing, depending on where you're placed, it's actually really hard to get around those. Also, the sharks can be a pretty quick attack, because they'll just dive diagonally downwards at you when you're within a specific range of them. With that said, the hit stun makes it pretty easy to dodge that. So, before we finish this stage, let's talk about the other spells in the game. By default, if you just hold nothing when you release the magic that you charge up, you do a fire attack directly forward that just does a wave of fire. Think of it like the fire weapon from Mega Man X1. But it can do several hits against enemies, and it's still pretty good, especially against enemies with shields. If you do one while you're just jumping, you do the spark element attack, which sends 4 electric pulses out from you diagonally. Good coverage, but given how the camera in this game feels and where enemies are usually placed, it's not the most useful spell. I think it's actually my least favorite spell in the game. Well, it's either that spell or the next spell, which is Earth Force, which is used if you release the magic button while holding down. You shove your sword into the ground and a giant fireball erupts around you. I think it does good damage, it's just that its range is so pitiful that I just tend not to use it because most of the high damage you're going to be taking in this game is touch damage anyway, so you want to avoid that as best you can. Another spell I tend not to use too much is Thunderbolt, which you use while you're slowly descending from a glide by holding upwards. You electrify yourself and an area directly above and below you. And again, it does decent damage, but it's just relatively awkward to hit with. Next up is Aura Shoot, which you use mid-glide. It's effectively a projectile attack during your actual, like, wide glides. And then there's the Phoenix one, which is probably my second favorite spell next to the Raging Bomb. You do that while you're dive bombing the ground mid-glide, and it does ridiculous damage, and similar to the Rage Bombs, what makes it really good is that it can hit multiple times. There's actually one specific boss fight down the line I decimate using it on. So now we're on these weird little appendages that have spikes, and there's a reason for that. These are the antenna of a bizarre lobster creature. Best thing to do here is to jump over its claw, which will slowly try to swing into you. Do a dive bomb into the eye, but then you can do the jump attack, which is you jumping and then holding down while holding the attack button to do extra damage. Like several bosses in this game, it dies pretty quickly after that. The bosses in this game can definitely be hard. There's several in specific that I think are some of the hardest bosses on the system if you're not using magic. But if you use magic properly and place yourself well, a lot of them can be killed pretty quickly. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're going to finish off our time here towards the village of Devote before heading on to the next region. See you guys then.